is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Grace of Kings, chapters 45 and 46. In these chapters, Mata strikes back, and it's pretty effective, unfortunately. For somebody who has always admired direct aggression, sending a bunch of fake soldiers into the field and then jumping down from above seems like it's maybe pretty sneaky also. But I guess, Mata can overlook that for whatever reason. I hate Mata. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So yeah, guys, I'm not going to make any judgments just yet, but I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be thinking of Mata at this point. Like, am I supposed to believe that he's improving as a person, that his mind is opening a little bit more, or what? Like, I don't know. But, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. Let's start with chapter 45, and I want to point out the opening of this. The title of the chapter is Dasu and Kakru. The subtitle is Wolf's Paw and the Big Island, the 6th month in the 4th year of the Principate. 4th year? I had no idea so much time had passed. Whoa. This is just... So, when considering, like, the start of the book, it's been 30 years? Maybe? 35? Because we started, like, 20 years before the first emperor died. And then his son was on the throne for, like, 5 years or 6 before he got captured. He was killed, right? I don't even remember what happened to him. And then 4 years after that, I think. Okay. So Mata is here because he is having to fight somebody named Mokri. Mokri is the general to King Dallo of Gan. And Gan is a pretty big, like, from what I remember, a pretty big player in all of this. And apparently the king has basically, like, lost his will to rule. He is just not really putting his heart into it and has fallen into a depression. And Mokri notices and is like, well, Mata's pretty distracted right now, and I don't think he has the time to spare to deal with little old me. I don't find that I'm going to have a better opportunity than this, so I think I'm just going to go for it. And he fucking takes down the king. Now, the king does not put up much of a fight at all. The king basically is like, yeah, you know what? I'm not really, like, cut out for this anyway. And just retires. Mokri doesn't even have to kill the guy, which I find sort of funny and sad at the same time. Like, I imagine King Dallo as, like, Stanley from The Office, where he just shows up because he's making time until he retires. And he barely does anything, does crosswords all day, and manages to clock out at the stroke of 5. That's who Dallo is. And when this guy comes in and is like, I'm taking the kingdom, he's like, all right. And just fucking, like, gets up and shuffles out of the throne room. So Mokri is going to continue to defeat some of the territories around him. And he gives the impression initially of being just as, like, overblown as some of the dumbass jags that Mata has already had to put down. And has these huge parades to celebrate his successes, despite the fact that he's like really not that, like, both of the lands that he has conquered so far did not have any sort of defense worth a damn or anybody putting up resistance to him. So he's like acting as if these are huge wins when really he didn't have to try all that hard to get them. But it turns out that maybe Mokri is pretty arrogant and likes to celebrate his successes more than he deserves, but he actually is a really good fighter, which we find out later. So that was kind of a welcome surprise because I wasn't really sure. I wasn't really sure how that was going to go. And Mokri also is willing to engage with all of this because he was down for the count when Wolf's Paw happened, so he didn't see what Mata can be like when the bloodlust is on him. So whenever anybody tells him what that was like, he assumes it's all exaggerated and that Mata's appearance and strength is also exaggerated. And he's just kind of like, yeah, I'm not really that worried about this guy. It's fine. I'm really good at what I do. So, I mean, if he wants to come at me, he can, but I'm not that concerned about it. Kyle's here. I love that Mokri is this badass sword fighter who happened to have like the flu when the rebellion was going down. Yeah, exactly. It says that he was like bedridden with an illness during the battle. So meanwhile, Mata, who's being advised about dealing with Mokri, he's told, Mokri's really not that big an issue. You need to deal with Kuni. And Mata's like, I will. I was gonna. But goes and deals with Mokri first instead. Mokri found Paring's meddling annoying. Kuni might have landed on the Big Island, but he only had a toehold in Han. The 3 newly created Tiro states in Gafika were all ruled by men who owed their elevation to Matazindu, and they were certainly sufficient to hold back the cowardly Kuni and his girl general. Mokri, on the other hand, was a good fighter and far more dangerous. In order to keep his world from unraveling, Mata had no choice but to strap on his sword and get back into the saddle. He had no one else he could trust to do the job right. He would deal with Kuni later, after he had pacified the East. So I like the way that this is like presented initially, when later on we were a little bit closer with Mata on what's like going on in his mind with all of this. And Mata's basically like low-key relieved to have something to do. Basically, war is his jam. And sitting around ruling is totally not his thing. Again, can him and Kuni just be friends, please? Please. Can they just work it out? Because Kuni is made for this shit, buddy. Made for it. Just let him do that stuff that you don't like, and you can go out here and conquer lands and inspire fucking troops and whatever, and let Kuni be the one to do all the shit that is super duper necessary that you just don't want to do. You know, like this is what my goal is eventually in life, that I will be able to just show up, do my podcast, and there will be somebody else who is going to take care of all the bookkeeping and somebody else who's going to do the editing and all of that crap. And I won't have to because they love it and I don't. I'm the talent. That's what Mata is, right? He's the talent and Kuni is the stage manager. Let him go on stage. You know, it's too bad though, because Kuni is also talent because he's really good at performing. It's fine. It's fine. He needs to be. But it's just so frustrating how great they could be. And Mata's just too big a doofus to fucking see it. And the fact that Mata's so assured, well, I gave those guys who are over there on the Big Island their states, so they owe me, and they're definitely going to have my side on this. Mata, you sweet summer child, whether someone owes you or not, if they're facing off against somebody who seems like they've got a lot more potential than you, I hate to break it to you, buddy, but that's not going to mean shit to them. They don't like you. The loyalty that you feel deep in your bones when somebody like is on your side is pretty rare. Most people don't have that kind of reaction. So yeah, I really, really enjoy this because it's totally on brand, but it's just so frustrating to read because you're just like, oh, Mata, you're such a child. In so many ways, he's just a fucking little boy. So moving on to the Tiro states of Dara saw they had to pick a side. They could either back Mata Zindu of Kukru, the greatest warrior the world had ever seen, or Kuni Guru of Dasu, the man with a seemingly endless fount of luck. The king of North Gefika, Theka Kimo, I think it's Gefika. I keep doing that. The king of North Gefika, Theka Kimo, had fought by the side of Mata since the day he killed Huno Krima. Everyone always assumed that he was firmly in Mata's camp. But before he became a king, before he became a general, before he became a rebel, Theka had been a brawler in Tanoa, a criminal who lived by the tip of his knife. He was sentenced to hard labor for maiming a man. On his face were still frightening tattoos that prison guards had pricked into his skin under the laws of Emperor Mapidere, so that everyone would always know what he had done. Like Mata, he was a physically imposing man and excelled in battle. But unlike Mata, he never considered himself to be serving a higher ideal. He understood the culture of the dark alleys and the night streets far better than the formal dance of diplomacy and courtly intrigue. In his view, the life of a noble was no different from that of a petty street criminal. Kunigaru and Mata Zindu were like the top bosses of two rival gangs fighting for the control of a city's markets and the rich protection money that merchants paid, and he was merely a lowly sub-boss caught in the middle. You pick the stronger gang or you're lost. I really enjoy this. It's so fucking true that the life of a noble was no different than that of a petty street criminal. It's really true when you get down to it. And the more I learn about how capitalism works, the clearer it is. It's just, I will take what I can until I get caught. That's sort of the underlying premise of it. I will take advantage of as many people as I can until somebody slaps me with a lawsuit or manages to enforce their will against me. And until then, I will do whatever I want. And the difference is with a noble that it's protected by the law a lot of the time because nobles write laws. Welcome to my TED Talk about the corruption of capitalism and the rich ruling everything and eating the poor and destitute and vulnerable populations. It's just dressed up nicer and politer. It's better educated. But it's certainly the same principle of being a predator. That's all it is. So he is 100% correct. And what he decides to do is go to see Kuni and sort of just assess what the deal is with this guy, whether I want to team up with him or not. And he comes in and Kuni is in bed with two prostitutes, which Theka is just kind of like, well, yeah, of course. I mean, he's like, the king of everything. Sure. But we know Kuni, this is not his deal at all. And I was like, what is the game here? I believe that Mata Zindu is in the past while you, great King Kuni, are the future. Kuni yawned. He got up and left the room. Theka did not know what to make of his reception. He had come to discuss the possibility of an alliance, but Kuni behaved as if he didn't care about him at all. Kogo Yelu then came in and invited Theka to lunch. Theka was served a cold meal of the coarse and plain fare that the inn had to offer. The eating sticks were misshapen and cheaply made. His unease grew, so they're not rolling out the red carpet for this motherfucker like he expected. Kunigaru must be treating him this way because he and Marshal Mazzotti already had some plot underway to conquer North Gefika. The big boss had figured out a method to take over his territory without including him at all. He was at risk of losing his land and throne, like poor Kosugi, and worse, maybe even his life. Kuni's coldness was a warning, a last ray of hope. He begged Prime Minister Yelu to speak to Kuni. Instead of an alliance of equals, now he pleaded to be allowed to submit to Dasu. He was willing to yield up North Gefika and fight for Dasu in exchange for the king's promise of a new domain once the war was over. Kogo nodded and said that he would do his best. Yo, this is some psychological shit, and I really enjoy it a lot. Do you know what Kuni... I've just covered another episode of Deadwood, and if you don't watch Deadwood, you should, first of all. But there is a character on that show who sort of runs shit, and he is, a man of really questionable morals. Questionable isn't even... It's not a question. He's kind of a bad guy. But he's also really good at a lot of things and does sort of look out for people in his weird way. And part of what gives him the advantage over so many other people who could be as powerful as him but aren't is the fact that he understands the psychology behind why people make the choices they make and what is important to them and why it's important to them. Because sometimes what seems, oh, of course, he cares about his family. It's not like because he cares about his family. It's because his family is part of his own reputation and image. And that is what he cares about. That sort of thing. And I really love the fact that Kuni is a similar type where he finds out who he's dealing with, figures out where they're coming from when they come to talk to him, and what the weakness is within that, and then figures out a way to get around it and undermine their expectations and thus set them really off balance. And it's just beautiful. Like, honestly, I admire this kind of thing so much. I flatter myself that if I were in this sort of position, I would be pretty good at this myself. It would certainly take a lot more work, but this sort of thing to me is in many ways a lot more valuable than certain outright powers, because this sort of thing leads to people being genuinely loyal in their hearts because they know that you get them. And people, in the end, a lot of folks, that's all they really want is somebody who understands what they're after and will look out for their interest to the best of their ability. And if you can prove that you understand someone and you understand what's important to them and will look after them and the things that mean most, a lot of times it's really all it takes is so I am just so here for this. I love it so much. So let's see. Kogo is heading out. I forgot about this. Kogo had come to Jimpen to help set up the occupation authority with the aid of the documents he had taken from the Imperial archives. But now he had to go back to Dae, where he could keep the islands of Dasu and Rui productive and support the war effort on the Big Island. I am honored. Kogo paused, moved by the tremor in Kuni's voice. Know that Mata has only his sword and cudgel, but you have the hearts of all your men. He's not wrong. I'm really wondering if Mata's going to start to learn how important that is and capitalize on it. I hope not. So Mazzotti sends off this dude, Theka, to conquer some territories for himself, figuring all right, that'll be a good way to keep him busy, keep him happy. Central and South Gefika collapsed before Marshal Mazzotti's forces, like termite-infested logs before a heavy axe. I love that visual. Yeah, that's a really good mental image. They had no choice but to flee across the Liaru River into Kokru for refuge. As they crossed, they burned all the ships that they could find in towns along the northern shore of the river, hoping that the river, broad but too shallow for the mechanical Krubans, would hold back the Dasu forces. They ordered all remaining ships on the Liru to stay anchored at towns and ports along the southern shore where garrisons would guard them and make sure they stayed there. While Me and Solofi kept a fleet of warships at Dimmu to help control the Liru, they sent the bulk of the navy, or what was left of it after the devastating attack of the mechanical Krubans, to patrol the western coast of Kakru with deep dragnets, hoping thereby to foil another surprise landing by underwater boats. So, Mazzotti has her work cut out for her. This standoff takes a while for her to figure out. She tries airships, and there's just there's no way. They try to build rafts, and first of all, the rafts are like not real easy to control, but it's also super clear to the opposing forces what they're doing, and all they have to do is bomb the areas where they're building rafts, because they're like way out in the open, you know? They don't have warehouses where they're building rafts, right? So, you know, and the rafts are also just like, yeah, they just are fragile. They're not in the position where they've got every sort of material available to them. They're in an unfamiliar place. And there just winds up being this long, long wait. And finally, what she winds up doing, she's like, goes into town and she's dressed in a disguise to make it look like she is a tourist, and is sort of examining what is at her disposal, and starts to become pretty interested in all of these like clay pots and things. And I, because I'm an idiot, assumed that she was going to make a bunch of clay pots and hide dudes in them. Like, you know, what is that? There's like one of the stories that Scheherazade tells is something like this. It's like Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, but they're in clay pots and somebody knows that they are. And so they pour boiling oil in each of the pots and kills the guy inside, which is really fucking gruesome. I can't think of like a worse way to die, except for maybe just straight up being burned alive. But I wasn't thinking about like, you put them in pots, that's all well and good. How do you get the pots over there, Natasha? Like, that's the whole fucking point. She's not going to be able to send a bunch of, like, merchant ships over and nobody's going to ask any questions. So what she does is she gets them to seal the clay pots, which float because they have nothing in them. Even if they do have stuff in them, there's a lot of talk about how when there is an air attack, there are certain ships that like do try and come in and trade, and they get shot down basically, and all of their wares are floating all over the river. It's all this food, stuff going to waste. It's like a shame, but it's barrels full of stuff and they're still floating. So that's sort of what seems to inspire this idea. And she manages to make these sort of like rafts that support them enough. It's almost like an inner tube kind of thing. And these guys put a pot upside down over their heads to hide that they are a person attached to this little bit of what just looks like flotsam, and very slowly tread water across the river. And from above, these airships look down, and it just looks like debris from another merchant ship that got blown up. And they don't think anything of it. And it's really, like, brilliant. She uses, like, wineskins as well, like, blows them up to give a little bit of extra buoyancy, things like this. So it's only, like, 300 guys that go across, but that is enough for them to go to the different areas where garrisons are guarding the remaining ships that have not been burned. And they take out those little garrisons really easily and are able to take control of the ships. And it's just so great because they never, like, the opposing side, I don't think, ever really finds out how she did this. So this leads to everybody theorizing that she's a witch, which seems right. Like, if a woman manages anything, it has to be because she's in league with Satan, of course. It can't be that she's just fucking more competent than you or has more imagination. It has to be she has sold her soul. So yeah, I found that really funny. But yeah, it's like, it's just such a smart idea. She's like, you know what? I don't need to get the whole army across. I just need enough people to take these garrisons out so we can go one by one and we can just do this real fucking slow. Because as far as they know, we're just sitting here. And it's still going to look like we're just sitting here. It's just very imaginative and I appreciate it a lot. So let's back up a little bit. Mokri is really fucking proving to be a worthy adversary. Like, Mata's actually kind of delighted. He dug in on Wolf's Paw and made Mata pay dearly for every inch of land he gained. Mata enjoyed the bloody battles against a worthy opponent, but reports from back home made him anxious. The ever-dishonorable Kuni had reconnected with his old friend, the bandit Puma Yemu. Mata suspected that Gia played a role as well. You ain't wrong, Mata. Once again, he was made the Marquess of Porin and led his horse thieves, the self-styled whirlwind riders of Dasu, on hit-and-run raids of Mata's convoys and grain transports. Mata despised these tactics, but he was helpless until Mokri's rebellion could be put to rest. He redoubled his efforts, and more blood spilled. Well, shit. I hate these tactics. Get over yourself. They're totally valid. This is how it works. Figure it out. Ugh, he's so snobby. So, we have Mata coming home, and everybody is acting really weird, like there's something that they're afraid to tell him. And he's worried that something has gone really wrong. But when he finally goes to his room and sees what they're all pointing to, it's Mira, and she's just sitting there embroidering as usual. And she's like, oh, apparently they decided to tell you nothing and let you find out for yourself. They're uncertain if you'll be happy or not to see me, and so this is their clever solution. So, he can tell from the way she's acting that something in her has turned a corner. And he says that he thinks to himself, she has made a decision about something. And when he, blurts out, "Are you leaving me?" he sort of hears it as he says it and is thinking to himself, I cannot believe me. Why am I worried on whether she's leaving me or not? I could have literally anybody I want. What the fuck? But it's because you care about this one, dum-dum. Mata is really stupid, in a lot of just basic ways. The fact of it was that ever since that day when she had told him what she thought of his glorious deeds, he had been unable to see himself except through her eyes, cruel, unnecessary, inelegant, and trivial. So she tells him, firstly, I used to have nightmares about my brother who would ask me, has he done what he said he was going to do? Did I die for nothing? Or is there something that's going to come of this? And she tells him the dreams have stopped. And when she went to her brother's grave, there's all of these fresh chrysanthemums and candles. And it turns out all of the soldiers of the 800 have been ordered to be treated the same way, all of their graves. So that's seemingly set my brother's spirit to rest so that he doesn't haunt me in my dreams anymore. So thanks for that. And then the second thing is, and she goes and gets the knife and shows it to him. I have such mixed feelings about this, y'all. On the one hand, she says, your enemies want to use me to get to you, but I'm tired of being treated as a tool. I want to live for myself. Okay. Fair. That I get. I really do. I'm not trying to be cute. I didn't think of it in that manner, but yeah, everybody's coming at her because of her connection to him, and what she wants or thinks is best does not matter at all. And I'm sure that's a huge fucking bummer. At the same time, Mata is a fucking bad dude, man. And when I say bad dude, there are people who are out in the world enjoying spreading pain and torment and are genuinely sadistic. And Mata doesn't fall into that category. But cruel? Absolutely. Uncaring about the effect he's having on a lot of other people? Yeah. And you can say, from the way that he thinks about how ever since she's told him the thing, like what she really thinks of him, he can't help but see that and point to that as growth. And I'm sure that's true, but how many people have to die for this man to grow? How much damage does he get to do before he ever finally stops with murder and mayhem and burying tens of thousands of people alive? Like, it's just, and this is just sort of a genuine question of mine. I'm going to relate this to something else that's sort of in a similar vein. So I'm in this group called Imagine Being This Loud While Also Being This Wrong. It's a tag group on Facebook. And there are people who frequently share screenshots of like ridiculous comments or conversations or posts and things like this. And in one of them the other day, and this was one of those moments where you're like, okay, I'm in the right group because everybody is reacting to this correctly, is a woman who shared screenshots of her boyfriend's posts, quote, before and after. This guy is basically a racist, misogynistic piece of shit who, since she has started dating him and educating him, has become slightly less racist in his wording and much more polite about his misogyny, but obviously still believes the same things and is just more careful about how he like handles them. And she posted this all with this like smug sort of like, look what happens when you try and reach out to somebody from the other side. Sometimes you can really make progress. And all of the comments were dragging her and just being like, you were willing to be with this guy when he was posting the first set of stuff that you posted. Like, this isn't you just having a conversation. You were sleeping with him. You were in a relationship with a person who believed and said this shit. You are not an ally. That is not like the way to handle this. And the vaguely improved posts that you are holding up as proof that he's a better person are not even quite reaching bare minimum for decency, actually. And you should not be feeling good about this, and you should not be patting yourself on the back. And I kind of feel that way here, except that, like, Mira is not patting herself on the back. She's just being straight with Mata about what other people are trying to do. But I feel like women are so frequently put in the position of having to do labor to improve the men in their lives. And men frequently see women as a means to improving themselves, that if I'm with her, she'll inspire me to be better. How about you just be better? I know that's a crazy thought and everything, but maybe you should just be better for the sake of it, rather than because some woman is making you or giving you ultimatums or not willing to be with you unless you do a certain thing. How about, instead of being better because you think it'll get you pussy, you be better because that's the right fucking thing to do? How about that? And I'm not entirely equating what's going on with Mata with that, because he's not just trying to be better for the sake of Mira. It seems like what she's said to him really like got under his skin so that he is seeing her perspective in a genuine way. But I just worry that we're going to let him continue this fucking campaign of basically terror, hoping that he like really does learn to be better. And what about in the meantime? So her decision not to kill him, I respect for what it is. Her decision to live for herself and not be somebody's pawn. And that I really do respect and I understand. And I don't think she made the wrong decision. But I also I wish that I understood a little bit better where Mira was coming from on some things. Like, she sees that her brother's grave is being treated better. Cool. And that has settled him from coming and visiting you in your dreams, apparently. But do you think that Mata is treating his soldiers now better than he treated your brother and those 800? Because if he's just honoring these 800 because one of them was your brother and you made him feel guilty, that's not actual growth. That is him covering his ass to please you. How he treats the men that are still alive should be what you use to judge him on. And that doesn't seem to be what she's saying. And I fault her for that. I understand her brother being very important to her, but him being the deciding factor, that doesn't really make, that doesn't wash to me. And I just worry. I don't know. I just don't. We'll see what Mira, how she handles all of this. Because I have found her a weirdly, a character that I can't relate to very much. And I'm interested to see what winds up happening with her. And Mira, weirdly, her embroidery starts to be a pretty big deal. She does a lot of it, and it's all of Mata. It starts to get a lot more, abstract. And it becomes a thing that he hands out framed pieces of her embroidery as a reward to people. And I say reward, I mean more of a token of his approval to people who have done well for him. And it becomes a pretty big status symbol to receive one of these. It's sort of fought over. He went straight to her rooms. And she says, calm as ever, she asked him if he wanted to stay and dine with her. I'll have my maid draw you a bath. I was thinking of steaming the carp I bought at the market. It's been a while since you've had Tanoa food, hasn't it? She did not ask him in a way that was submissive and seductive. She did not ask about his day's exploits on the battlefield or express admiration at his valor or strength. Always, she simply offered him simple things that they might share. She treated him as a friend, he realized, not as the hegemon of the islands of Dara. He strode up to her and pulled her to his lips. He could feel her heart fluttering against him like a surprised bird. Her hands, which had been holding the needle and the hoop, dropped to her sides. After a moment, she returned the kiss. He pulled back and stared into her eyes. She stared back steadily. Other than Kuni Guru, she was the only person who seemed to have no trouble looking into his double pupils. I understand you now, she said. I now know why I could never stitch a proper portrait of you. You are frightened by the legends that have grown up around you, by the shadow of yourself that lives in people's heads. Everyone around you is afraid of you, and so you begin to believe you should be feared. Everyone around you flatters you, and so you begin to believe you should be flattered. Everyone around you betrays you, and so you are beginning to believe you deserve betrayal. You are cruel not because you want to be, but because you think people expect you to be. You do the things you do not because you want to, but because you believe the idea of Mata Zindu would want to do them. You think the world should be a certain way, and you're disappointed that it does not live up to your vision. But you're also a part of this world, and you fear that your mortal flesh cannot live up to this vision of yourself. So you have constructed for yourself a new image, an image that you think is easier to live up to, an image of cruelty and bloodlust, of death and revenge and injured pride and stained honor. You have erased yourself and replaced you with these words copied from old and dead books. But you are not a bad man. You do not have to be afraid. There is passion and compassion in you, but you've locked them away as though they're signs of weakness, of your similarity to other lesser men. Why do you do this? So what if you leave no mark on the world? What if your work falls apart after your death? I was once uncertain whether it was right to love you, when the whole world seemed to quake in fear of you, and thousands of voices told me what the right thing to do was. But Mata was right. In all things that matter, faith in the heart is the only measure. Our mortal hearts are small. They are limited in what they can contain. What joy did it give me to hear that 1,000 men lived to glory when my heart grieved only for the loss of my brother? What does it matter if 10,000 men think the man I care for a tyrant as long as I see him in a different light? Our lives are too brief to worry about the judgment of others, let alone that of history. You think my embroidery trivial? Yet all the works of men must be trivial in the fullness of time. There is no need for either of us to be afraid. That's a really interesting speech. In some ways, I agree with it. In other ways, I'm like, like in terms of her, if 10,000 men think you're a tyrant, but I see you differently, who cares? Well, okay, that's all well and good, except that, he's a ruler. And if thousands of people think he's one thing, that's dangerous and a problem. But I guess she just means like in his heart versus the practical aspects of who cares. As far as him creating a vision of himself to live up to rather than looking at what he actually wants to do. Listen, I don't know how many of you can relate to that, but that is a little too close to home for me, my friends. I started going to therapy about a year ago, and we're just finally starting to like really get into some shit. And the thing that my therapist has pointed out to me time and again is that I don't know who I am when I'm not doing things for other people. If I'm not performing on the podcast, if I'm not with a partner, especially a partner who's fresh and new that I'm still trying to impress, if I am not at work and kind of like on stage with customers, if I am alone, I don't know what I want. I only know what I want in the context of pleasing other people. And that is a really fucked up thing to find out about yourself when you consider that you are a very opinionated person. Like, I think of myself as very strong-willed and strong-minded, but it turns out that like, maybe not. I'm not sure. And a lot of what I have done in my life, it turns out, I have chosen because of the expectations that people had and wanting to live up to those or conform to those. Live up to implies that the expectations people had of me were somehow morally superior to what I wanted to do. But I am going to choose conform to because some of these decisions did not have an inherent better choice. It was simply that one choice lined up better with the concept of who I was according to others. And I chose the thing that I thought would make everybody else more comfortable because I wanted them to feel like they knew me. And it's a really weird thing to realize about yourself, that maybe you have been functioning in the world according to everyone else. And what does that mean in the end about how you're going to feel about your life when you look back on it? So yeah, it's just, she's sort of seeing that with him. And I feel like when you live in a public position the way that he does, to a degree, that is going to be unavoidable. You are going to have to consider how things look to people. But I understand what she's saying here in terms of like, it's going to tear you up if you don't listen to what you genuinely want and keep doing things because you think you're supposed to. It's not going to feel right to you after a while. And also, you can't have confidence that you're making the right decisions because you're making them for the wrong reasons. So you may look back and realize that you tried to like fulfill this ideal or this idea, and that wasn't something you should have been aiming for at all. And I found this really, really interesting. And I feel like she sort of hit the nail on the head here. And it's so weird how like self-destructive that sort of thing can be. Like, I realized I was not exercising and eating badly in a lot of ways because I felt like if I tried to be athletic or take better care of myself, that would fly in the face of what people expected of me. That I would make them uncomfortable because I was trying to break out from the idea of like the funny fat girl, which I'm supposed to be. And I didn't want to make people uncomfortable or to make it seem like I was trying to overstep myself, that I knew my place as the funny fat girl sidekick, and that was what I was. And since I have sort of started to see that, it's really upsetting that we put ourselves in these boxes and just are like, well, I guess that's what I am, and I guess I may as well just be that, and don't consider what we really want. we think we know what we want, like, until somebody really asks, what if all of these people were not a factor and it was just you? Then what? And all of a sudden you're like, wait, can you repeat the question? Like, I don't know. Meanwhile, the gods are pissed. Well, one of them is pissed. Kiji is really mad that she's not going to kill him. He's just like, what the fuck? I thought I had her. Shit. And I'm just like, ha ha, that's what you get. So anyway, I'm in 45 minutes in and I'm still in like the friggin' first chapter, I think. Oh yeah, so finally we have the fight between Mata and Mokri. And Mokri is a really worthy opponent. They fight for almost a full 24 hours. Like, they're so exhausted. And when he finally kills Mokri, it's a genuine, like, victory that he feels proud of, you know? And the fact that he is as huge as he is and Mokri still gave him a run for his money is really fucking impressive, frankly. And Mata takes the guy's sword, which is a really plain, brutal-looking weapon, and he gives it to Ratho as a reward. And Ratho says he's going to name it Simplicity. Ever since following you, my life has become as clear as the simple songs my mother sang to me as a child. My happiest memories are of that time and this. Mata laughed. Well named. Most rare now is our old Simplicity. So, of course, because of what a valiant foe Mokri was, Mata gives him like this lavish funeral and lets Mokri's family keep their titles and money and all of this stuff. Like, they'll be pardoned, and it's just, he is really being generous. And Mata's men are like, what the fuck? And Mata says, do you not understand why? And of course, Mira speaks up here. Mokri fought you in the field with no tricks, trusting only that his strength would overcome yours. There was no shame in his loss. He is a hero who lost not because of any fault of his own, but because the gods had decided to put you in the world along with him. Mata hoped that someday the world would understand him as well as she did. Yeah, it's sort of funny, like, yeah, if you weren't alive, you would have been fine. But he's like, that's a real compliment, thanks. So, a few loyal men escaped from Zudi and brought news of Dasu's victories to Wolf's Paw. For a long time after hearing their report, Mata sat still on his throne. No one dared speak up in the tent as the torches flickered and shadows danced across Mata's stony face. Torulu Pairing was right. I must deal with Kuni-Garu once and for all. So then we go into Mata's counterattack. This chapter is interesting because it deals with Kuni coming back and introducing Gia to his new wife. And it's a really, it's like, it's the sort of thing that this could go either way, especially as a male author. Women are treated as being catty and jealous so much of the time that if that was the tack taken here, it would be, on the one hand, very understandable, and on the other hand, disappointing. As somebody who has recently had a kind of a blow up with a female friend that resulted in us not being friends anymore, and I don't tend to just cut friendships off like that, but there are times where there's just not another option that feels like it's right to me. I was accused of having this blow up because I was just jealous of her, which is such a deeply insulting thing to be told, that my feelings are not a valid thing, that they must stem from some pettiness rather than something that's a genuine concern and hurt. And I feel like that is such a fallback position when having two women interact with one another, especially when there's a male writer. And I appreciate so much that he walks that line really carefully, where he's like, listen, they're both wives of the same man. There is no way to avoid comparing themselves to each other. That's going to happen. Feeling a little bit threatened, that is going to happen. Wondering if he likes her better than you, for many different reasons, is going to happen. But maybe they can rise above that, and despite their own insecurities and doubts, work together and be good to each other. And I really appreciate how carefully he walks that line. Like, he's really, and he makes sure to have each of them be just as worried as the other. Rosanna doesn't know if, like, how Gia feels about her. And Rosanna's usually pretty good at being able to tell, you know, she has that, like, ability. But with Gia, she isn't able to read her the way that she is with the average person. So there's no telling whether or not Gia loves her or hates her or is, like, angry with her or what. And she forced herself to be calm. She would not be afraid. She would not see monsters where there were none. Wasn't acceptance of the truth about the self her talent? She would accept her limitations and strive to befriend Gia. There must be a voice next to Kuni who spoke for those just like her and her mother, the powerless who yearned for peace. She had come far and carved out a place for herself. Gia could be a powerful ally. See, this is the thing. Sometimes we can be rational even if we feel threatened. And I really appreciate this, that there are a couple of things that factor into this. One being like, just taking a step back and being rational and being like, I have no evidence that I need to be worried at all. So let's deal with that first. Nothing she has said or done is, like, throwing off any red flags for me. Secondly, I and my perspective are valuable and necessary for somebody like Kuni to represent the poor and helpless. And I am not going to betray people who are in the position that I used to be in by ruining the opportunity I have to work for them. And third, if I befriend Gia and we actually grow to be friends for real, she can be an ally to me. And if there's something that Kuni disagrees with me on, but I can get Gia to see my way, both of us working on him could maybe turn him around. And that could be really helpful. So she's just being so smart about this. And I just really appreciate that so much. I really appreciate too that she's thinking about the people that she, like, kind of represents informally. And that's so important. Like, she is taking her duty seriously. Meanwhile, Gia is asking around about Rosanna. The maid, whose name is Rona, Gia questions initially, and this poor maid knows exactly what the fuck, but she's too young to quite understand the tact that Gia takes. Because initially Gia's like, just tell me about her. And the girl's like, I really don't want to. And then she starts pushing her and is like, I hear that she doesn't make him laugh, or she doesn't dance much, does she? And it turns out that she does make him laugh. She doesn't actually make him cry. She actually dances a lot and really well. And she thinks to herself, when they were first married, Kuni and she had shared an easy, joking rapport, but she wasn't much of a singer, and she didn't remember him ever laughing or crying with her the way the maid described him doing with Rosanna. She did not dance, could never have danced like Rosanna. Suddenly she felt the ghost of her vanished youth. Gone was the red-headed girl who had once inspired the future king with a dandelion. So then she starts to fantasize about, like, well, what if I drugged her and she lost the baby? And then she lost favor with him. And then and then she's like, oh boy, I really need to put that away. That is a fucked up thing to even think about. I can't believe I even entertained that for a second. And listen, one could fault her for even thinking it, but can we all admit that we have all had really ugly thoughts about doing things to people that worry and harm us? And she recognizes Rosanna has not actually harmed her. Like, there's no reason to do this, but I really, really appreciate that we get to see Gia have this thought and reject it and be horrified with herself. Because sometimes those kinds of thoughts just pop into our head before we really like have control, and we can't help but indulge in the fantasy of it for just a minute, just a second. I swear, that's all it is. So she has to reassure herself. She goes and looks at all of the letters that Kuni has sent her in invisible ink, and really has to think over the fact that, like, despite everything and being remarried, he wrote to her all the time. He clearly really cares about her. She was his first love, the mother to 2 of his children. That, you know, she encouraged him to meet someone else. And she can't be acting like this about it. And she says, maybe Soto was right. It was silly to make a fetish out of love and not to accept that love was like food and each dish had its own flavor. The heart surely had room for more than one. But she would ask Kuni to name their son, now that Tototika was 4, the age of reason. It was time to secure her place and to prepare for the palace rivalries that were sure to come. Interesting. So, like, you know, she's like, I'm going to be secure in the fact that I was here first, but I know that there's going to be some shit. She's looking at it in a much more political light in some ways. Like, Rosanna is still being political in that I have a duty here to represent my people and to befriend someone who can help me. But the way that Gia is seeing it is a bigger picture sort of thing, where she's stepping back and looking at the way everyone else is going to handle it, with him having 2 wives and sucking up to them and trying to play each of them against each other probably. And she's like, all right, I better get ready for that because I know it's coming. And she's not wrong, because damn, that is some fertile ground for people to exploit if they want to. And I do really, really like that the opening sentence of this little section where Gia's thinking to herself starts off with, Gia twisted and turned. Kuni was asleep next to her, snoring loudly, as was his wont. She had forgotten about this habit of his. Otho Kryn was a quiet sleeper. So it's really kind of funny because she's like sitting there thinking about how this other guy that I fuck, he doesn't do this. And then, I can't believe that he might like this other girl better than me. Like, you were just thinking about this one guy and how he doesn't keep you awake at night and how sleeping with him is easier and better because he's not like this. And then you are outraged at the fact that maybe there's some things about her that he prefers to some things about you. It's just, that's so human, you know? We are all this way. So he decides on the name Timu for his son, which translates to the gentle ruler. And their daughter's name is going to be Thera, meaning dissolver of sorrows. And she's very satisfied with those names. She likes them. So I only have 2 minutes left to talk about this whole battle, but really that's all it needs. Mata sets up a bunch of straw men, and I don't mean that in the argument way, on horseback, and uses them as this massive distraction to Kuni's army, while Mata and his buddies land inside the gates using, they jump out of an airship using parachutes. And basically, the entire army's outside the walls, as armies are used to do, and they just lock the gates so the army can't get in and help anybody, and they take the place from the inside. It's pretty brutal. Like, and so far outside of what we know of Mata's, like, usual MO, tricking somebody like this, and he's fine with it. So, is he growing and starting to adapt and realize that there are other ways to do things? Because I feel like Mata, 4 chapters ago would not have considered this. I feel like he would have thought this was really dishonorable. I don't know. I don't know if there's something about this in particular that makes it fine for him. Is it just that it's because he's going up against Kuni, and Kuni he considers to be such a shady, faithless person that he can do whatever, and nothing is dishonorable when it comes to taking down somebody like Kuni. And this results in a scene in which all of Kuni's like close household is trying to get on an airship to escape. And the airship simply cannot hold everybody. It won't take off. And it comes down to everybody staying except for 3 of them. And Kuni won't choose between his wives. He kicks his kids off and just says, Mata's not going to hurt children. They will be fine. But everybody else is like, dude, no, what are you doing? And Gia finally is the one who steps off and tells her sister wife, please be good to my children and take care of them. And sacrifices herself. And Soto afterwards is like, well, that was a nice little performance. Like, she's not moved at all. And Gia tries to be like, what do you mean performance? And Soto's like, well, he was really smart in making sure not to choose between you or Risana. So right there, he has managed to keep himself on the level with both of you. And then you, sacrificing yourself, have made it so that Risana, if you manage to survive this, owes you forever. And Kuni also owes you. And you look great to everybody around you. And Gia tries to be like, you're really cynical, you know that? And then she sort of is like, but you're right, though. And it's pretty funny. So the chapter ends with Mata coming in. And I was just like, oh, what's going to happen? Because if Mata chose to kill Gia at this point, in a way, I wouldn't even be surprised or blame him, because she was like under house arrest and still managed to do a lot of shit behind his back. So like to a degree, I'm kind of like, you being paranoid about this woman would make sense. But I really hope he doesn't, because I like Gia so much. So that's about it, guys. That's it. That's those chapters. So I think there's like 2 left. Not 2 chapters, but like 2 episodes left before this book is wrapped. I can't believe how long it has taken to cover this. This is a big fucking book, but I'm really enjoying this. So thank you again so much, Kyle, for commissioning this. This has been super, super fun. And I hope that you guys will all pick it up as well, because it's really well written and just moving in a lot of places. So I will leave you with that. I will be recording Veronica Mars after this. So if you want to join me for that in a moment, please do. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.